The following is a presentation of NoVA hackers at ShmooCon Epilogue 2014, hosted by Mach37, brought to you by Compute Cycle.
Thanks, Mix. It's nice to be here. My name is Curt Shaffer. I'll be presenting today with Plummer. This is really a second talk on something that I started some research on a couple of years ago. Some of you may have seen it at ShmooCon 2012. The talk was entitled Raising the White Flag. It was basically bypassing antivirus or whitelisting solutions such as Bit9, McAfee application protection, and the Microsoft's App Locker. So what we wanted to do is take some time and say, where have things gone? Hopefully these people have learned, some lessons learned from what we were able to discover. We found vulnerabilities in the software itself, and in some cases in Bit9 we were able to inject into one of the processes and just kind of piggyback off of the permissions of that process to run anything we want, whether it was banned or blacklisted or not. There was just some general techniques that were across the board failures for all of the products. And I'll say it again now, like I said then, is that we definitely believe that whitelisting is a nice move in the right direction, but it's certainly not a silver bullet. And that's the reason we keep reiterating and going over this information, is because we just want everybody to know that there is no silver bullet. I know most of us in here know that. But that's really the reason for us to continue. It's not that we hate these products or we hate any of the vendors. We think it's a move in the right direction, but more is needed. It will continue to be needed. So we call it the Allegory of the Cave. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Aesop fable, but it's really about how things have progressed and how people can progress. So we thought it was fitting for the talk. And we wanted to basically say, has application whitelisting coagulated as expected? What we find is no, but I want to give you guys some information up front. This isn't going to be as meaty as a topic as we were hoping at first, because we still were working on some disclosure issues and disclosure information with the vendors. We just want to make sure we're doing that properly. So we're going to give them that information and give them some opportunities to fix that before we release any of the code. We're not going to talk in general, very specifics about the vulnerabilities that we found. We're going to keep everything very high level in general. Apologize for that, but I think you all can hopefully at least understand that process sometimes works and sometimes it takes longer than others. So what is this? Again, we all know that AV is not enough. Whitelisting is still being pushed for a replacement for AV or a silver bullet. In some cases, I've actually heard people say that whitelisting can just take the place of antivirus. And maybe there's probably arguments pro and con for that. Some people say that AV is better than nothing, but at the cost, it's really hard to justify. If you can build that into an operating system or make it free, yeah, okay, we'll take it. But otherwise, adding another $35 a seat to our clients, really, another client agent running on a system really just isn't helping anybody. It's already on a network near you. If it's not, it will be soon. And some future stuff that we'll be talking about will be including some of the network-based stuff that's doing network whitelisting. Things like SourceFire and some of the other companies are implementing some interesting features in that area. Also, for this talk, we're going to spend a little bit of the time up front talking about what we talked about at the last talk for ShmooCon in 2012. For those of you that have seen that, we apologize for the reiteration. We just didn't want to assume that everybody watched the video and knows what we're talking about. And so we were going to go ahead and touch on some of the findings that we found and what we covered. And then when we're going to move into the more of the new stuff that we have. So who am I? Curt Shaffer. I've been in the IT field for about 15 years now. I just started, I've had my own company, Symbiotic Network Technologies, LLC, since about 2005. But it's always been really, kind of a side project for me. Just recently, last year, towards the end of last year, I started it full time. We're offering training in threat intelligence, incident response, and pen testing services. We're also working on a number of patents for some hardware devices and some other new features and technologies that'll be coming out soon. I've done intrusion analysis and malware analysis, incident response, and system administration for large governments, ISP level systems, international governments, local governments, just small businesses. So I've run the gambit of seeing the difference between the sizes of networks and taking all those challenges into consideration. I have a couple certifications listed at the bottom here. If anybody's happy about, word soup, CISSP, obviously. I'm a big SANS advocate. Even though I do provide training through our company on our own, I still support SANS 100%. They're an excellent organization. Working on my GSE currently, just waiting to complete a paper, which if I get time, I'll do. So hopefully sooner rather than later. But also CompTIA, Microsoft certifications, etc. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Judah, and he's going to give the introduction and probably start going through the beginning of the review from the last talk.
So I'm Judah Plummer. I've only been in security for about 2 years, and I'm not quite as certified as he is, but I'm working on it. Right now, I currently work for Foreground Security, which is also in this building. I'm only a SOC analyst. I've been trying to get Extraordinaire put in there for about the last 6 months, but no one else really thinks it's very funny except for myself, so that's not going very well. But yeah, so I graduated from University of Pittsburgh in 2009, studying comp sci and math. So I didn't get into security until I actually started working with Curt. And so I kind of attribute all of this to him. So thank you on that. And finally, I want to say I have yet to present at a NoVA Hackers meeting yet. I know it's mandatory, so I'm hoping to be giving a talk about bypassing the downloadable content and digital rights management on the Xbox, because hypothetically, if someone were to buy the new Call of Duty game, he and I should not be able to play the same game at the same time. And, well, you hypothetically may be able to do that right now. So moving on. What did we test and what was tested last time in ShmooCon? So in 2012, they tested McAfee's application protection, Bit9, and AppLocker. Why? They're the biggest. They're probably the most prominent names that you're going to hear. So it only felt reasonable to put those up against each other. And here you go. Just more along the same lines. Myself, I worked on a Bit9 deployment. It was actually around the world. It was really cool. It was one of the first things I did in security. So that's kind of why I got brought along on this talk. And, it's kind of interesting to see things from both sides, to be, see the bypass and then to be able to go and find it and be like, this is how they did it. So that was really cool for me, a great learning experience. So what did they find? So they found that Windows file protection didn't work too well. Basically, in Windows XP, if you were to, say, change the name of calculator, calc.exe, to a protected program, such as like WinLogon or something like that, you couldn't kill the process in XP because it said it was a protected service, even though it was just checking on the name. So what they found is since then, they've changed that. It's hash-based or something else now, so it doesn't work anymore. Java, on the other hand, does. Obviously, I don't need to tell you guys about that. It's so ingrained in the corporate world, and there's so much trust in legacy applications that you really can't control it. It's just too large. So they were able to not only run JavaScript in, I believe, memory, or Java exploits in memory, but they were able to write executable code to the local machine. That shouldn't happen. And not only were they able to do that, but they were able to set the entire payload, comprising of not only just the exploit, but the payload as well. iExpress, a packaging tool that is used to, package. But whenever it does so, it digitally signs the outside containing box, if you want, with a Microsoft cert. So the hope was that if this is signed by Microsoft, it should be, it should bypass any whitelisting, because Microsoft stuff is probably trusted. So
it worked on older versions of AppLocker.
That's what it was. So it worked on AppLocker back in the past because it didn't check into the package itself. It just looked at the package as a whole. That also doesn't work anymore because people have learned, vendors have learned, and they've changed it. So what did work? Well, Adobe, Flash, exploits for that worked flawlessly. pretty much for the most part. It was all day. And
This is across the board, too.
what?
This is across
I
the
mean,
board.
yeah, for all of these, it was pretty much a guarantee that any of these were going to run. The VBA was pretty interesting. He was able to run it out of an Office document, I believe. So
Because you could write direct shell code from the VBA code.
you could write, direct shell code from the VBA code. So executing that from within a document.
Just to make sure it's clear, because what you're saying and what you're seeing is opposite, which is when you say work, the exploit work, meaning that the whitelisting failed.
Correct. So this is from an attacker's point of view or perspective, not
Worked
the.
for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty much all of these worked, and it's not just McAfee that was subject to this as well. Bit9 was almost the exact same way. Windows file protection didn't really work very well. Java did. iExpress didn't work. What about Adobe, JavaScript, everything else? All of those worked once again. So you could kind of see a running trend. The old ways are still the ways that work, as unfortunate as that may be, but we're going to show that even later, that they're still the same ways that work, even so. So you may ask, why is this still a problem? Why are we talking about it? Well, when you hear something like the quote above, the most effective thing you can have for your endpoints, that's a pretty, that's a strong statement. Yes, very strong statement. So it kind of, I don't want to say antagonizes some people, but when you see something like that, you kind of feel like either they're overcompensating or, I don't know, they're salesmen, so it's all right. So initially, whenever we started, we had a 30-day license trial version of Bit9's server, parity server. And,
This is the start of the new stuff, by the way.
What?
You might want to mention this is new testing.
I apologize. Yes. So that's pretty much the end of the review. A lot of stuff did work. Some things didn't. What has changed? He's going to cover that in a few minutes. But for the beginning, the intro, this was something interesting that we found about the server itself, the Bit9 server. So I say 30 days to life. Is that a prison sentence? Well, not necessarily. We found this looking at us.
Why did we find it?
Because we got delayed, and it happened to be longer than 30 days until we got back into writing this and preparing for this. So obviously our trial ran out.
Somebody forgot to take a snapshot.
And someone forgot to take a snapshot, and it wasn't him. So, but what we found is we were thinking, can we roll back? Can we change the system clock or something to try and trick this trial into working again? And we found out that if you just uninstall and reinstall, it saves the database, it saves everything that you've written, any roles, any configurations, and lets you go on for another 29, 30 days without a reboot. So just food for thought. Thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, like I said, the 90s want their trial bypass back. Same mistakes over and over and over again. So what did they get correct, I guess you could say? We've been bashing them for 10 minutes or so now. Something good had to have happened. Well, sure, DLL injection doesn't work very well anymore. Bit9, at least, and I believe the others do too, have memory protection now that are able to block direct injection or DLL injection. And
Well, the reason we brought this up is because this was the vulnerability we found in the last version of Bit9.
So in the last version of Bit9, this was successful in 2012. So
it's obviously fixed.
yes, obviously it does not work anymore. So what new things do work? And I'm going to turn it back over to Curt, and he's going to continue on with that.
Just to elaborate a little more on the bypass that we found, again, on 2012, we found that there was a sub-service of parity.exe that was notifier.exe. This is basically the pop-up box that tells you, hey, you can't do that. We basically found that we were trying different techniques, and we were trying to inject into the parity service, see if we can run with those permissions, but that was not possible. Even though we found a video that was from 3 years previous on YouTube, where somebody was able to actually inject into the parity.exe process. So it was something that was already known before. But when the developers fixed it, they put memory protection on parity.exe, but not any subsequent processes or child processes. So we had notifier.exe would come up, and we were able to inject into it fine. And like I said, we were able to run with complete control. Even if you banned specifically files, we were able to run those. So it made the application completely useless. If you'll see in the talk at ShmooCon, you'll see there's a little bit of a ruckus in the beginning when I gave this information out, and it was kind of somebody from Bit9 was sent down, and they kind of, said, hey, you're releasing this information improperly, etc. But I had information to prove otherwise, and which you could tell when they were told to sit down and shut up and let us give our presentation, because we obviously had information that they didn't know about and everybody else wanted to hear it. So that's why we wanted to bring this back up. But we tried it in the newest version, and the new version that we tested is 7.1.3. I know there's a little bit newer versions out than that. I know 7.1.4 is out, and maybe 1.5 at this point, but obviously they turned protection on that service. So again, they fixed something, so we'll give them some credit. Some of the new things that we were able to find as far as bypasses are concerned. And the truth, again, to just give a disclaimer, we spent a lot of time on Bit9, and almost all the time, mainly because there was a lot of time to spend. That kept us busy through the whole time. In fact, we found at least 5 0 days that we're considering that we're actually able to bypass the whitelisting software of Bit9 itself. And we're not going to get into the very details just yet. We're going to talk at a high level of them so that you guys can maybe get some wheels turning. I think a lot of the guys in here are smart enough that we're going to talk about some of these things, and it's not going to take you long to figure it out, especially if you're running the software. If you think about it and noodle around for it, I think you'll be able to figure out what's going on. So DLL hijacking. Mandiant did a great paper on this a number of years ago, basically hijacking the search order of DLLs, the way that DLLs are loaded on a system and the way that it's actually looking for those DLLs. There's a way that you can then basically bypass or steal the execution time from that, or jump in front of a DLL that's actually supposed to be starting in the beginning of the system. There's watering hole techniques. Watering hole attacks have been something we've seen a lot of advanced threat actors using. It's becoming more and more prevalent. You're reading a lot of the newest attacks that have been out there. Watering hole techniques are really becoming more appropriate. And the reason that they work so well in the bypasses is because they're using things that, that was touched on a little earlier, but, trusted applications such as Java and things like that. These are just, and those aren't necessarily problems of the vendor, because I think every one of these actually now have Java support as far as doing whitelisting on the application itself for Java. The problem is getting a handle around those applications and getting it to actually work. So, little disclaimer there too. It's not all the fault of the vendors. Modifying executable file types. We'll talk about this a little bit, but this is basically included some testing around changing the magic number and some tricks around that, as well as just trying to make things like .txt an executable file type in the system. Dynamic annotation techniques and similar dynamic building techniques. This is actually a pretty interesting function that I was doing an incident response for an incident this year, and I saw it being used. I didn't really know what it was at the time, and I had to look it up. But when I saw the actual execution, I was like, that's a really neat thing. And we actually have a talk that we're trying to release later this year. Maybe we'll even do it at a NoVA Hackers thing, where we have a POC botnet using dynamic annotation. But we'll get back into that in a little bit. I don't know how many of you heard of Microsoft's Winhttp. It's basically HTTP management over, for your servers. I don't understand why. I guess you could say HTTP, not even S. So I think the S support is already there, but who's going to start using this, and why would you use HTTP management? It just doesn't make sense. I couldn't find a reason why. Security ID modifications. This is really to address the fact that when you're running these application whitelisting systems, there's some that have the capability of saying specific users of specific groups can run such applications. Like you might have administrative tools that are supposed to be running on all machines. So you let your domain administrators run those, or whatever group it might be. The other thing that we also tested was just removing security identificators. Identificators? Is that a word? Identifications, it is now. So removing it completely so that's a null value, or changing it to system or something similar. It was actually pretty successful. So DLL hijacking, again, this has been around a while. I think the paper from Mandy, it was from 2010 at least. I was talking about Windows XP. Essentially, it was been used for a persistence method for a while. We tested to see if we could trick the whitelisting solution into executing the hijack DLL with our own malicious code. The vulnerability was discussed in the, oh no, this was the DLL hijacking. This was the DLL injection that was from the raising the white flag, so that was not correct. But the DLL hijacking worked. So again, I just kind of gave you the information. Mandy wrote a paper about it, that it worked very well. So you can probably put 2 and 2 together and test that on your own network probably today. Watering hole attacks. As I said, they're becoming more popular, and the huge range of techniques that are being taken advantage of and coming out, especially when you think of technology such as HTML5, it's a very scary field. And you can see why they're moving in that direction. Again, when whitelisting moves up, and how are we going to start implementing HTML5 protections? I don't know any of the whitelisting softwares that have HTML whitelisting at this point. Are they, for as far as the HTML5, you can do remote recording and screen grabs right from the HTML code. I think Kevin Johnson from Secure Ideas actually did a talk where they were able to actually do like semi-cross-site scripting and vulnerability, where they played the audio file at a level high enough that you couldn't hear, but it was picked up by the microphone, and then was intercepted by the machine, and then told the machine basically go to the site and become infected. I don't know if they actually demonstrated the working code on that, but I know that they were working on it. The files that are executed by trusted applications and their plugins is really what makes this possible. Some of the things that we were able to do last time are still the same. Firefox, for example, if you're allowing Firefox and you're allowing Firefox plugins, you can use local data sources and use JavaScript from there to execute anything that you need to. The plugins that are in the browsers, Adobe, Java, things like that, those are all things that are going to continue to be used. So again, it's not necessarily the fault of the vendor here in all cases. I think across the board, the reason that this is probably for most of the 90% of the bypasses is because there's going to be tools and times that we require to trust something fully, and that's really what taking advantage of that is really where it's going to be. So in the type of modifying executable file types, for changing file types such as text files to be executable, I think essentially that would work in theory. Really do a lot of testing on that because we talked about it, and you really would have already needed access to the system to change that kind of level of access or change that setting in the registry value. So, while it's probably a possibility, it really didn't seem to take much, we didn't put much time and effort into trying it. Now, changing the magic number of the files to be repaired later is something that was actually quite successful for us. So for example, we have a PE file header, MZ being the first couple bytes, removing the M from that and just dropping it, changing that magic number. Bit 9 does not understand that application, so it doesn't know how to stop that application. Well, you say it's not going to run. Right now, it's not going to run. But if we incorporate that with a watering hole technique where we repair the PE header and add that M back in after the fact, after the file's already been marked as ignored, or has been ignored by the bit. I keep saying bit 9. I don't mean to do that because they got mad at me last time. So the whitelisting software. So it was being ignored, and we were able to actually replace that magic number, repair it in a later code set, and get execution to work pretty regularly. For dynamic annotation, really one of the things that I saw on the incident was the malware was building off executable samples from scripts that it was pulling from trusted sites, such as Microsoft's TechNet, and then it was building them on the fly with VB. So it was going out using HTTPS to connect to Microsoft TechNet sites to pull example codes for whatever it might be, maybe create a remote thread or whatever the sample might need to do. And because it was a trusted Microsoft site, obviously it's encrypted. We're not seeing a lot of that traffic, but it's pulling that scripts down and then using the VB to compile MOF executables to be executed on a system. And in the case for that incident, they were actually building, I believe it was the Pity Tiger Trojan that they were dropping on the system and building on the system. So again, I'd mentioned that we're working on a talk for later this year. It's actually pretty interesting, just to whet your appetite. It's really a proof of concept botnet that we've done to use that. I didn't really explain this, but dynamic annotation is the API access that's given to Windows that is used by things like the accessibility options. So it gives you really low system level access. And it has things like the setting that really threw me off and really caught my attention was that, there was one called check-in server. And I said, well, that's almost like they built it for C2. So it allows you to modify things on the fly. For example, in PDFs, you might use a check-in server or remote server if I have a form that I want to keep updated. And every time that you open it, I want to make sure that you're opening the latest version. That's really what the setting is for. Well, I mean, as we already said, that's great for command and control, and that's exactly what we need. But the ability to, then inject into processes and other features of the system using low-level access of the API, we're really allowed to do able to do some interesting things, like really messing with forensic investigators by injecting into the process when they open it. If they open procman or any sysinternals tool, we actually inject into that memory set so that it won't see it. So it's kind of like the shell game. As they open tools, we're jumping into those new pieces or new memory spaces so that we're hiding in the tools that they're using to find it. So that's, I'll leave the rest for the talk, but it's actually pretty interesting. It was something I decided to spend a lot of time on after I found the capability, because it was something new that I hadn't seen before. Well, when HTTP, not a lot of work has been put into protecting new servers. The WinHttp remote administration components of Windows. I asked a couple admins and they kind of scratch their head at this. They don't even know that it exists, which is kind of a scary thing. And then I don't know, it might even be more scary when they find out it exists and then they want to use it. So maybe we should just leave them in the dark. But it allows you to do things like execute malicious code through trusted processes. Again, this is an administrative tool. People are going to use it. If you think about WMI or things like that, SC or one of those other control, PowerShell even has a lot of features. But these are all tools that our admins are going to need and will continue to need to access these remote machines so that they can configure them properly and maintain them. It's basically utilizing that trusted process and that trusted chain that's going to exist forever and taking advantage of it. Question here?
Is that WinRM that you're referring to?
It is WinRM. That is what it is. So any other system or admin tools that are needed to use or needed to administrate a tool, our servers and systems are gonna be targets continually. For security ID modifications, basically, we found, I know that Bit9 Parity has this. I think some of the other ones have the feature as well, but you can do it on a per user basis. Again, the type of reason for that would be a group of administrators that might be able to, or might need to run a specific app, or if specific users need to run a specific, say you were successful in getting Java, completely removed from the network except for those 5 applications that need it. Well, you find out who those 10 people are that use those applications, and you can put them in a group and allow them to run that Java version. So we've done a little bit of testing. We didn't have a full range of testing time on this, but we did find some successes in changing these things and modifying the files or processes and to be SIDs that were trusted, such as changing it to a system or changing it to null values because it doesn't have a default setting apparently to change for that or to account for that. But our guess is there's a lot more to be uncovered in that as time goes by. Some of the things that we're considering for future, we really wanted to try the Macintosh bypasses because there's now Macintosh software support for a lot of these. including the Bit9 parity and the others. I think the Bit9 parity actually was the reason we didn't do it on that one, was the version was like 7.1.4, like one newer than we have. And it was kind of difficult to get the one we had anyway, the trial version, because they try to push you into their cloud testing environment now. We want to play a lot more around with HTML5 features, so we want to really extend that. We've alluded to the fact that there's no protection for that right now in a lot of these cases, and we really want to just say, what does that mean exactly, and how deep does that problem go? Some of the things we thought about in the past and want to also pursue more are trusted directory and trusted user abuse. So you have things like SMS or SCOM or SCCM or whatever it might be that are running on your network deploying applications. There's normally a directory structure of those applications. How much attention are our administrators paying to actually watching that directory structure? Is it, are they watching the reads and writes to that folder? Probably not, and I say that, with a little bit of a laugh, because, I've seen that they don't. Trusted user abuse, again, if there's users that have passwords that don't change, we have service accounts and things like that, and they need to execute things, leveraging those, we want to extend that a little more and see what else we can do. So far, I believe that all of the systems are really only using HTML or MD5 hashing. So we want to have a little bit of hash collision fun and see what we can do there. Also testing the strengths of, or the uses of other hashing. What if they're, what if we can modify those in other ways? And as they add support for other, like SHA-1, SHA-256, are there bypasses on that? Finally, we do have a Metasploit module that we wanted to release, that we will release. Just to talk a little bit about that, we're codenaming it the Alan Parsons Project, Sharks with Friggin' Lasers. Think about set when you're thinking about what we have here, but really we're going to have menu options for functionality. You could choose your operating system version, your vendor choice, the exploit style, or bypass style and choice, the payload choice, and post-exploitation capabilities. We were actually going to do this talk with the guys that did the evasion stuff yesterday, and I think they're actually doing this stuff again today with the antivirus evasion framework. They did really good work. We were hoping to kind of do a joint talk at ShmooCon this year, but obviously, we're here at Rejecticon for a reason, I guess. So. I know it's not supposed to be called that. I apologize. It's. But the idea behind that was, and the reason we reached out to them is because I see a similarity, and we see we're going down, while they're different products, we're moving down the same idea and the same path. So I think there's a lot of similarity there. I think there's a lot of work in the future between us as collaboration between the groups as that moves forward. With that being said, I don't know that there's much more that we need to add. I think is that time right, or are we short that much?
Yep.
Wow. Well, we have lots of time for questions then, right? Is there any questions out there? Chirp, 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 chirp. Yes?
So is there really any point in whitelisting then? Should we dump?
I'm sorry?
Should we dump whitelisting?
No, like I said, I think, we definitely feel that whitelisting is a nice move in the right direction. I think it kind of came along with, if you think back, when we were thinking about spam, right? Everybody thought blacklisting was the great thing. And then it just got out of hand because there were so many potential blacklists that, you had to hire 2 or 3 full-time people to maintain that list. A lot of people moved to a whitelisting feature in mail, and it worked out really well for that. I think that there's a nice move forward. Recommendations that we usually give when we talk to customers, when we give them this information, they ask a whitelisting solution with memory protection in place, and you have a HIP solution, and you have an antivirus solution, you're getting to a pretty good state. And some of the new Windows features, you're really getting into a really good state of doing the best that you can. Again, I don't think there's ever going to be a silver bullet, but we're moving forward, and it's the step in the right direction. The reason we even bring it up is because we just want them to please stop saying that they stop APT and that they stop, 0 days. It's marketing hype. We understand that, but we need to understand that it's not. There's no possibility that they're ever going to stop everything. So, no, I don't think we should dump it. I think that the vendors should probably look at further increasing their features, we can look at things such as ROP and other techniques that haven't been thought of in memory that need to be moving forward. And memory obfuscation techniques, there's those going on. So I think they need to be looking a little further ahead into how they can further control that. But at this point, it's a good step. So I wouldn't say dump it. I'd just say add to it. Yep.
But would you install it on a new network? Can you repeat the question?
Yes, so the question was, would I install it on a new network? Well, actually, I would say install it on new and old networks. As Judah mentioned, we actually worked together when we did the deployment he was talking about. We were the largest deployment of Bit9 in lockdown mode at that time. So it was 135 sites across the world, and we had a very bad advanced persistent threat issue. We were continually just fighting fires and finding, persistence on the network that was there for a scary amount of time. So when we were able to do the installation on that, the best thing that it provided us was endpoint visibility. We were seeing what was running on these systems. So we were able to identify a lot of the capabilities that were in place on the network. One of the things that jumped out on us was we noticed that sethc.exe, which is the sticky keys functionality, was calling cmd.exe on all the domain controllers. So RDP the window up, domain controller, shift 5 times, and you got system level access to the domain controller. We were wondering how we were going through wholesale password changes monthly and saying, how are they continuing to get the whole database? And this is why. This was one of 5 backdoors actually found that they had built into the network. So the visibility was awesome. So we did start to roll out Windows 7 and move some of the new features out, and doing the deployment where we can now work from a known good state made that deployment a lot easier. So new networks are really the best case scenario, because when people say they have gold images, it's very rarely the truth. They may have one gold image, but it's probably the one that's 6 years old and nobody else is updated. So I hope that answers the question. You got another one here?
What were the other 4 methods of persistence that you identified?
I'm sorry?
What were the other 4 methods of persistence?
As I mentioned, we're not going to bring a lot of those up until we actually have a discussion with the disclosure.
You're going to repeat the question?
Yeah, so he's asking what are the other 4 methods of persistence that we found with the application whitelisting, specifically Bit9. And the reality is, like I said, proper disclosure has to be done. We're big advocates of that. So we're waiting for that to be done. I hate to tease everybody with it, but we're doing a submission hopefully for some of the later cons and further in the year, so that we could do more talks and release our actual code base. Question up there?
Do you think the method that these programs are using is workable? Can they be improved? Or is there so many architectural problems that they have to go back to the drawing board and develop something different?
So the question, and I'm going to paraphrase a little, he's basically saying, do we think that there's areas for these applications to improve so that they can become more secure or more strong applications, or should they scrap it and start from the beginning? Did I get that correct? Okay. So yes, I think there are some areas to improve, to continue to improve. The first thing that we found is memory protection wasn't on in the older in version 6 of Bit9 and some of the other ones, and that was the biggest issue. We're always dealing with memory resident viruses at this point. So it was a logical progression to turn it on. And I just think it's up to them to be at the lead of that, or the bleeding edge of that, to understand what those things are. Like I said, HTML5, settings and configurations and modules. I don't even know that they've even begun to think about that. Maybe they're on the whitelisting or the whiteboard there somewhere, but I would almost bet to say that they're not. So I think there is improvement capabilities, but I think like I said, a more holistic solution is going to include something that includes maybe some more HIPS type solution. Maybe they add that feature to their product. I don't know. I'm not in their product management cycle, but I definitely think that there's room for improvement, and there always will be. They just need to make sure they're hitting that bleeding edge and helping.
As a follow-up, isn't the technology then fundamentally flawed if something like HTML5 can come along and just ruin the entire whitelisting?
I think what. Yeah, sorry. Repeating the question. Basically, he's saying, is it completely flawed, or are we waiting for something like HTML5 to just come by and completely nullify the application? Is that pretty much?
Yeah, what I mean is every time a new technology comes out,
Right. So he's saying that every time there's a new technology out, if it breaks it, is there a reason to be using it? I think yes, because how many people are using HTML5 right now? I mean, it's getting more prevalent, and it is getting out there. But now, how long? How long has it been out? How long? When was the RFC written? And when are the deployments going? So I think that deployment and use phase, especially when you're going wholesale enterprise environment, is going to be slow enough of a process that it probably, you're definitely going to never win, right? This is always a rat race for us. But I think that they can continue to improve and keep on that. I think the major issue that we've brought out a lot of times is that, it's the applications that we're using that we're trusting in these systems that are being leveraged against us. And that's not really, again, the fault of the vendors. It's sometimes fault of the enterprises for using those antiquated systems or, allowing that kind of access or systems or applications to be built on the network. So it's not just the product problem. Most of the bypasses are features that are used through exploiting a trust of an already existing system or process. So, I mean, just that fundamental problem doesn't go away. I don't know of a solution to that at this point, personally. Are there any other questions? No? The other thing that I can only say is keep up to date on your applications. As I said, 7.1.3 fixed the vulnerabilities that we found on the Bit9. Vendors are continuing to find vulnerabilities in their applications and move forward. So that's the biggest thing you can do. Patch. Make sure you're up to date on those. As things are found, we can hopefully keep ahead of that. Other than that, yeah. There's another question here.
Do you think SWIDs would help mitigate the use of rogue DLLs?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Would SWID, software IDs, help mitigate rogue DLLs?
So what are you meaning when you say software IDs?
I can't remember the actual standard, but they're tags that vendors are starting to put in software to show that the software has not been tampered.
So the question is, are there software identifiers? Is that what you?
Well, there are software.
So what? How does that mitigate that? And he's explaining software identifiers to be, I guess, identifiers in the code to say this hasn't been tampered with, some kind of tamper protection of the code. I haven't really looked much into that. It's an interesting topic. I'm definitely going to take a note down on it and look at it. I think that adds some help, but you would think that digital signatures help too, but. I mean, I think February of last year kind of showed us, if Bit9, for example, gets a certificate stolen, then it kind of nullifies that whole security model. So I think that you're going to find the same issue with those kinds of things. It may be another layer in that onion that we need to build, certainly, but I'd have to look more into it to say specifics on that. Maybe we'll add that for some future talks on that.
Tagvault.org.
What is it?
Tagvault.org.
Tagvault.org is a site where we can get more information on that. Any more questions before we end? So here's some contact. Oh, wow, that email is completely wrong, so don't use that one. So it's symbioticnt.net. You can follow me on Twitter. My normal Twitter handle is inetopenurla. I also run a blog on the internet, openurla.blogspot.com. It's basically a reverse engineering blog. We're adding a little bit more threat intelligence to that, or how to use hardware or use malware analysis to identify indicators of more advanced threats. Hoping to push that more and more as we move forward. I know I haven't updated it in a long, long time, but I've got some people that I've gotten the reins on, and I'm cracking the whip on to try to push out at least a monthly post, if anything. I did start the @bit 0 day Twitter handle. This is going to follow all of the Bit9 whitelisting that we bypasses that we find and we can release. So I mentioned that we'll be getting this information out there to you guys after we do proper disclosure. If you want to keep up to date on that, you can follow that Twitter handle to keep an eye on that.
So the Chief Security Officer of Bit9 is watching.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something you would like to tell him?
No, I think essentially, like I said, we don't. Okay, so the question is, the Chief Security Officer of Bit9 is watching. And is there something I'd like to tell him? He actually favorited the tweet from the Bit0day Twitter handle that said there were the 5 vulnerabilities that we were talking about. So that's an interesting thing. I don't know why he would favorite the fact that there's vulnerabilities in the software, but what I'd like to say is, again, it's not a personal bashing thing. It's not a, I've used Bit9 personally, especially Bit9, to solve the toughest case I've ever had to work on so far in my career for incident response because of the visibility that it gave us. So we don't mean to say that the tools are not good and are not worth anything. What we would like to say is maybe he can go ahead and tell the salespeople to tone down the level a little bit on the silver bullet topic, and maybe leverage the fact that they're integrating things like FireEye and Mandiant and such, and to use that to actually make that collection of tools a little stronger. So I would say, if there's anything I'd say, maybe have the sales guys take it down a notch. And then you could read Judah Plummer here, J Plummer at Foreground Security. He has some interesting stuff coming out, like he said in the NoVA Hackers talk about some Xbox stuff. I think it was Christmas that he found a vulnerability and called me up, and he's like all excited. And I kind of got on him. I was like, he's such a newbie, and you're like 2 years in, and you're already like finding 0 days. It took me like 4 or 5 years into security before I even thought about finding vulnerabilities. So, but it's good. I think there's a lot of good stuff to come from him. I think you're going to hear a lot more from him as time moves on. He's up and comer in the area, especially in social engineering. So don't watch when you talk to him. Keep it at bay. Any final questions? All right, I want to thank NoVA Hackers Group and everybody that supported this conference. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, please reach out. Again, if you want to follow the delivery of the information on especially the Bit9 vulnerabilities as we do proper disclosure, you can follow the Bit0day Twitter handle. That's where we'll be releasing that information. And we hope to be releasing all the information and the Metasploit modules and the code and the details of all this information in a future conference, maybe DerbyCon or Sector or something like that. Thanks for listening.
This has been a presentation of NoVA Hackers at ShmooCon Epilogue 2014, hosted by Mach37, brought to you by Compute Cycle. Video recording and streaming services provided by Cranial Thunder Productions.